Right, Flossie, it's Granby here, and about time I think we had another story, don't you? So it's going to be Mrs. Pepperpot again. And this one is called Mrs. Pepperpot and the Shoemaker's Doll. Sounds a very funny title to me. There was once a shoemaker who won a doll in a raffle at a bazaar. But the doll was no good to him, living alone as he did in a little cottage, where the floor was strewn with old soles and bits of leather, and where everything he touched was covered in glue. Does look a bit of a mess, doesn't it, I have to say. For with all the village shoemaking to be done before he could do his own housework, you can imagine what the shoemaker's home looked like. And now there was this doll. When he had brought it home, he stood looking round the little room and wondering where on earth he could put it. At last he decided to set the doll on top of the chest of drawers, next to a half loaf of bread and a rubber boot. Then he went to bed. In the night he dreamed that the doll came over to his bed and said, "I can scrub, I can sweep, make a bed and housekeep. If you won't, I will." When the shoemaker opened his eyes next morning and saw the doll on the chest of drawers, he remembered the dream, and he laughed to himself. "So you can scrub and sweep and make beds, can you, my little flibberty-gibbet? Still, I suppose I had better do it for myself to save you spoiling your pretty frock," he said. So he made his bed, which he hadn't done properly for 15 years, and underneath it he found the old gold watch his grandfather had left him. Until that moment he thought it was lost forever. After that he washed the floor and found a half-crown lying in a corner behind the cupboard. Then he swept out all the rubbish from the drawer in his workbench, and what do you think? Right at the bottom he found a little ring with a red stone in it. At first the shoemaker was astonished, but then he remembered. Yes, of course, it was that little girl from Crag House. She did tell him she had lost her ring here once. She came to ask about it several times. "I'll put it on the shelf here and give it to her when I see her. And now I suppose I'd better tidy up the chest of drawers for you, my little slave driver." He started by removing the rubber boot, but he decided to leave the half loaf, because he liked to take a bite from time to time while he was mending shoes. Later in the day, a village woman came in. When she saw how tidy the room was, she clapped her hands and exclaimed, "Well, I never, what a change! You must have had a lot of time to spare getting this place shipshape. I suppose you have my shoes ready as well," she said. The shoemaker pushed his spectacles up on his forehead and stared at the woman. Then he said, "Come again Tuesday." "But it's Tuesday today," objected the woman. The shoemaker let his spectacles fall back on his nose. "Come again Wednesday," he snapped, and went on with his work. "Oh, you're just the same old lazy sourpuss that you always were," said the woman, and left him to it. She's not pleased, Flossie, is she? In the afternoon, a little boy started playing in the street outside the house. He came to the door and asked the shoemaker to button his jacket because his fingers were too cold to manage the buttonholes. "Come again Thursday," said the shoemaker in his snappy voice. "But I'm cold today, mister," said the little boy. "Come again Friday," said the shoemaker. "You're just a grumpy old toad, so you are," said the little boy, and went away. "Good riddance," said the shoemaker, and he didn't even turn round, but went on with his work, mending and patching, till it was too dark to work any more. Then he ate up the rest of the loaf and climbed into bed. But in his sleep he dreamed that the doll came over to him, and this is what she said. "I can button, I can mend a hose, I can wipe a runny nose. If you won't, I will." "You're a proper little fusspot, aren't you?" said the shoemaker when he woke in the morning and remembered his dream. "I'd better get those shoes finished for Mrs. Butt. Then when I take them along to her, I can take the ring for the little girl as well." So he sat down at his bench and finished mending Mrs. Butt's shoes. Meanwhile, the little boy had started playing outside the window again. The shoemaker called to him. "Come here, little boy. Let me button your coat for you," he said. "Would you like me to wipe that nose of yours too? You can tell me if it hurts." That was nice of him, Flossie, wasn't it? Because sometimes it does hurt a bit when people wipe your nose, which is most annoying. "Of course it doesn't hurt," said the little boy, blowing into the hanky. He blew in the hanky like a trumpet and waved his fingers in the air. They were quite stiff and blue with cold. "Not so cross with me today, are you?" he said. And then he added, "I'd like to help you now. Got any messages for me to take?" "Well, yes, as a matter of fact," said the shoemaker. "You can take these shoes to Mrs. Butt at the corner. And while you're at it, you can take this ring and give it to the little girl at Crag House. She lost it here a long time ago." "All right," said the little boy, and he ran off with the things. It wasn't long before he was back with a message from Mrs. Butt. "Mrs. Butt told me to tell you that if you want your Sunday suit cleaned and pressed, she'd be glad to do it for you. And that girl at Crag House told me to thank you and asked if you'd like to go to her birthday party tomorrow. She's asked me too. Wasn't that nice of her?" The shoemaker was staring in front of him, thinking hard. Very nice of her, I'm sure. But as for me, I've been on my own for so long I wouldn't know how to behave with other folks at a party. No, I'd better not go. But when the little boy had gone away and the shoemaker had got into bed, he dreamed again that the doll came over to speak to him. "I always smile when folks are kind, not turn my back and act so blind. If you won't, I will." Next morning the shoemaker remembered and said to himself, "I shall have to go then." And he has never regretted it. For one thing, he wore his Sunday suit, all neatly cleaned and pressed by Mrs. Butt. And for another, he had 3 different kinds of cake to eat. And most important of all, he found out that it's good for people to get together now and then, and not always to be moping on their own. Ever since that day, the shoemaker's cottage has been as clean as a new pin. And the shoemaker himself whistles and sings as he goes about his housework. He makes his bed and scrubs the floor, he buttons boys' coats and wipes their noses, and he mends the shoes in double quick time. Every now and again, when there is something he doesn't want to do, he takes a quick look at his doll on the chest of drawers, and he always ends up by doing whatever it is he has to do. For if he won't, she will. Well, she sounds quite a bossy sort of doll, but she's obviously been very useful to him, and actually she's been a very good friend to him too, hasn't she? So we all need someone like that to just keep us up to the mark, don't we? I expect that BB does. I expect BB tells you odd little things that may be a good idea. And they always are. Who keeps me up to the mark? Well, probably Papa. He makes helpful suggestions and he's always right. So that's very good to have friends like that, isn't it? I've got Papa, you've got BB, and the shoemaker has got his doll. Well, it's been very nice to talk to you again, Flossie, and I will be back again soon, probably in a week's time. Love you. Lots of love. Bye-bye.